Abitakepi. Chantal está na frente do Zapido. Yuha. Clifford Canku Makiapi. Ana ko Dakota Captured Tua Takwe Makiapi. Achana kide Daku Iwata kide Dakota Ashkapi. Okichi ze wapi. He Iwata Captured there. Hana 1862. Oiate ukitapi ki he skawi chashta akichita no wasma wichaka khapa bi ku concentration camp at he Yamani he wichaka shkapi na wapi ki de tokaya Mitapi because Chakashkapi na there are they call them bands. Under the bands they had all these families. Mitapi piwana mahbea choni akta yakumpi na ko Charge which have that car, which have competition. Charge which have that Okixui or not. In their memory, I'm going to mention their names. Hona Oicha, the Namitaki became not Mushikapi. And Kakish which happy. It's in memory of the Dakota families imprisoned here during the winter of 1862-1863. These are heads of families and members of family, members as compiled by the U.S. Army on December 2nd, 1862. Ehana, the heads of families, Itancha Wichakapshni, Due Itancha Chinki Takadi Yabi, Ka Due Itancha Oyate, Takutaki, Wichaku. In other words, he was resourceful, taking care of the whole families that were under him. So he, today we have, everything's upside down. Well, now we call them Wichashta Itancha. And they hoard everything that they got, Moses God, their wealth, but it was not like that in Hana. These heads of families were, whatever they get, they shared among the Wazuya, which Ashta, which Hakte Pikina, Tiwakina, Taku Yohabana, which Hakte. Tokai Wichashtawan Wapaha Shah Japi. Etiwahe Orta did Wichawapi, Dakotia Chaje Wichapi. Ehanako Inupagishe Passing Hail Band. Yamani Hesh Black Dog Shumka Sapa Oyanke Umangish Good Road Band. Umangish Taopi Band. Umangish Pijuta Zizi Band. Umangish Kuji Matan Yeshe Wakute Tiwahe Ke Charge Omawapi Chunku Ape Tiwahe Mital He Namchion Kapi He Uchakash Kapi Ambetu Kine Matan Hancha Ichate Mashiche. Tonight's band was Eagle Heads Band. Yeah, a hockey head. There was some mixed blood families. Each didn't have no we charged a thumpy, but the witch house. Had Dona Yahid became Tiwaha the top became did not witch house in a church. If you look for your descendants back when U.S. Cavalry rounded up our people and put them in prison, these are the bands that U.S. Army wrote their names. So Anako, the Dakota prisoner of war letters, Boapi. Dakota Kashkapi, Okichi ze Boapi. Et Kodawa, Sunkama, Michael Simon Chapi. Kchi de Boapi, Unkahapi. Head de New Hawaii. Han Taku Wapazo Pikina, Petukide, Chichipazo Pikte. I'm going to share with you the process that we used in order to translate these Dakota prisoner of war letters that were written all in Dakota. Dakota Oapi. I'm going to translate them as best I can into English. And the major reason for the 1862 war was the 1830 Indian Removal Act initiated by President Andrew Jackson, but also the treaties of 1805, 1851. Wapi Taku Makoche Wichaki Pikte Wapi Kakapi Kadakota Yate Chimpishni Duka Skali Chashka Nina Taku Makoche Kanako Bedeka Taku Dakote Akta Umpiki Henoasna Wichaki Bichimpi. The U.S. policies were to gain lands and resources from the Dakota tribes in Minnesota. Otokaifta prior to the U.S. policies were to remove and push all Indian tribes westward. Wichaka Kapa Wachimpi, Oyatina. The removal of major chiefs from villages in Minnesota, Minnesota Capi, such as Chief Red Wing, or Wapa Harsha, to Lake Pippin, close to the Mississippi River, which is where the treaties were initiated. All the treaties were abrogated after the 1862 war, and proceeds were given to the white settlers. The Dakota people were promised food and many were starving. They couldn't leave the areas they were placed on to go hunting elsewhere. Dakota Chajeki had, that means, da apiki he da, koda apiki he koda, friend. So when you hear the word Dakota, that means friend. Kodao ukichi api. And they had to feed themselves in any way they could. Chintaku wini tokipshni. The war began. It was one band of Dakota people who waged the war, and the rest didn't initiate the war. But the three other bands were implicated. The U.S. made war with all four bands of Dakota people. The four bands are called Santee. Santee Oyate. They issued a policy of bounty with scouts after all four bands. A lot of children were killed for $200 per child, per scout. After the war, all Dakota from Minnesota were exiled, Najichapi to South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Canada. Tokajon Najichapi Nipi Chipi. They were to survive. That's the reason why all of us are related. Taku Kichiapi, Makai Tokcha, Oyate Tokcha, Kta Naushi Chapi, Hina Unhe, Na Papi Ka, Tokan, Minishota Etan, Inupan, Nipik Tishnikiapi. At present, the Dakota people are still in that era of exile. Henach Minishota Etanga, Makoche Ukitapi Etanga, Naoshi Chap Na Ake, Makoche Tokchama Aktab Mayakapi. November 2nd, 1862, the U.S. soldiers rounded up the Dakota people at Morton, Minnesota, and took them to the concentration camps. The first one was Fort Snelling, where men were separated and taken to Mankato, where 38 were Pauchaisapi. They were hung. December 26, 1862, the hanging was the largest in the U.S. history. Those that were not hung were sent to Davenport, Iowa, where they spent the next 8 to 10 years at Fort McClellan. Many sexual acts were committed by the U.S. cavalry soldiers against our Dakota Dakota girls and women. Some were our half-breeds, Hankewashichupi, descendants of those who were impregnated. These Dakota women, against their will. Our Dakota prisoners knew what was happening. Heche, Doan, Dakota, Maya, Akichita, Hana, Kaiducha, Goewichai, Dakota, Hana, Doampi, Kowachekia. All they could do was behind the prison walls as they were taking our women to be raped by the U.S. cavalry soldiers. All they could do was sing. Hey, Kantuka, Dakota Wimana, Mushka, Ore, Chakio Chakwapi, and Ochukiksabi. Dakota Uchashka na Wachekiapi. Ore, Tawichu na Hanako Chwinku na Cheche, Ish Takojo Chapi, and I bet you could get a care. And Dakota and the hair Chakwapi, and what you get, and Gapi. One time I made a presentation and one Washichu woman says, what kind of retaliation these prisoners of war, what kind did they think about? It made me remember that there were approximately 45 Dakota young men who protested against these soldiers as they were standing up against the U.S. cavalry for these young women that were being abused. One day, these 45 young men disappeared. Akichita, Tokia, Ewichapi, Toni, Inupana, Wawichakapshne. When these 45 Koshka stood up against these soldiers that were imprisoned there. One day they gathered these 45 young men. They executed them. So that was my answer to the young Washichu woman. Said, how come they didn't protest, or how come they didn't stand up and try to protect the women they were abusing? So that's the answer, Mitakuyapi. 45 young men. Which Hakuyapi. Makpewi Choni Ktakia. Kihirapi. Also, many women and children died from suicide. Some died from disease, starvation. And many women were raped and inhumanely killed if they resisted. Naichishinka ena wichakutepe. Wiana. For many of our Dakota people, there's a lack of closure. Today, because Dakota people are still living in exile today, they are trying to have some truth telling about what happened. Museums still have trophies. Recently, Dakota people were given back a rope used in the hanging at Mankato in a pipe from Chief Little Crow. But it's still an ongoing process to get justice. Some of the bodies of the 38 were taken for use by the Mayo Clinic and the Mayo family as well. Many of the letters from person have now been transferred, and some of them are missing. But yet, Our challenge today is to look at our history, even if it's painful, the experience of our people who suffer. Hamitake, can you move to the actual, the letter translation team were myself, Clifford Canku, I was a coordinator and translator. When we say translator, that means we were born with our Dakota language. We didn't speak English at all when we were born. Like myself, I didn't speak English when I was born. Makoche makaksiza haska oyanke head matumbi. Emitake piko wasna Dakota yapi. Washiju yapi wahteon apshni. Dakota yapi chena ohon api. The other translator was Tiospaye, Reverend Mike Simon Chape. We're both Presbyterian ministers, but we're not Presbyterian Washiju. We're Dakota Presbyterian Church. We still use our Dakota hymnals. We still pray Dakota. We still preach in Dakota. Another translator was Sandy Gishik, Sandy Columbus at Joplin, Morton at the other, John Peacock, he's got a PhD. Dr. John Peacock, he was our editor. He's from Spirit Lake, Makoche, because we had to look for money. We had Dr. Bruce Maleth was our grants manager. And then Rebecca West was a graduate assistant. Nakon Mushpashi Jolie Snow. She's from the La Framboise family. She's Ankewashiju. She was an assistant. The next slide. The original Dakota letters wording is the process that we came up with. Dakota letter translation format. Because we didn't do this, we didn't have no direction. But me and Reverend Michael Simon, we translated when I went to seminary in Dubuque, Iowa, the Greek Bible, the Hebrew Bible. This is the process we used. The translator, literal Dakota to English word translation. Dakota yapi gina oapi, woapi. On the third phase, it's translated as Dakota English version. The next slide. The copy of the original letter, Ditchin, when our Dakota when our prisoners of war Dakotas wrote letter, this is an example. Here's a sample. Very hard to decipher. You have to have good eyesight. You have to have magnifying glass. You have to have a team of original speakers so that we didn't translate these ourselves. The elders helped us translate these to make sure that the letters that we translated were as correct as possible. Next slide. This letter was written in Camp McClellan, Davenport, Iowa. They were all written to a missionary, Deche Wapi, Tamakoche, Mitakwi, and then goes on, it's hard to read. But they were all written to the missionary that came there. His name was Riggs, Stephen R. Riggs. He knows how to speak Dakota. And they adopted him by giving him a Dakota name, Tamakoche, his country. Wotakwe Kahapi. They adopted him as a Hunga. And they trusted him to carry these letters that they wrote at Fort McClellan, to carry them out to whomever they wrote the letters to, so that Stephen returned Riggs when he left the prisoners. He took these letters and searched for our relatives out there to deliver the letters, what they wrote. And once he delivered the letters to the intended person, he kept these letters as his own. The reason why is because these letters were addressed to him, Tamakoche. And these letters are all housed at the Minnesota Historical Society, St. Paul, Minnesota. Just like everything else, they were not filed when we went there to retrieve these letters. They were all in 5 boxes, cardboard boxes. So a lot of these records, they're not filed in these museums. They were put in cardboard boxes. They don't know what to do, what was involved with them. Nobody translated these letters or filed them. A lot of the museum documents are not filed in an organized fashion. They were all put in the boxes. They just put on there Stephen returned Riggs' collection, written by Dakota prisoners of war. There were 5 boxes. Can you imagine? 5 boxes full of these letters. Nobody looked at them or studied them until we went to look for them. I learned one thing. When you go to these museums, if you're a Dakota like me, they wouldn't tell you the truth. They wouldn't reveal what they have. Me and Reverend Mike's family, we talked about it and said, who should we send so that they could be truthful, these museum keepers, about what Dakota collections they have in these museums? So we selected Washiji Wikoshke, who was a blonde, beautiful blonde. She was a messenger. She went and said, and talked to these museum directors, say, what kind of Dakota documents do you have in their museum? In other words, she was able to access or open a lot of these white tape that they have in the museums that they don't want to open to us Dakotas for some reason or another. So one thing we learned is that if you're going to look for museum documents, get a pretty Washichu, probably a Norwegian girl, to open doors for you. We learned that. So Dakota, ona takwe chunkum bigina Washichu, wowe takwe chunkum. We learned how to use Washichu messengers so that we can open the white tape of our documents that are in the museum. Fetch it. Walks up there, After a while, when you are walking Washiju schools and institutions, like myself, I graduated from Morris, Minnesota, a branch of the University of Minnesota, four-year college, and I went to seminary in Dubuque, Iowa. I graduated and got a Master's of Divinity. Then I got my PhD in the School of Art in Maryland. Kai, you notice that in the printing here, I don't put my name, I don't put PhD. That's the reason. The reasoning is I'd rather be Kchewachashka. Kchewachashka, Machashka, Wakantpa, Ohoatacha. I'd rather just be known as a Kchewacha common name, common Dakota. You know, I don't put my titles on there. You know, we're not. Kawashijo Takia Tako Woksape, Unkichipike, na Woidakunyapi. What we learned in the white world and education system, we indigenized it. There's a new word called indigenization. And we indigenize it to apply to us. Unkia Dakota, Unkokach Nikapik Tehena, or na. So that's a process, is that anything that the Washingtons teach us, we indigenize it. The reason why I'm saying that is because these Dakota letters, we indigenize when we learn Greek and Hebrew in seminary, the process of translation, word study. Kaku, Ichoy, na, you study in depth, and it's called exegesis. You have to learn that process in order to translate Dakota, Ichoy, Owapiki, na. Remember, that's why I share with you the three ways of translating the original Dakota word, and then the literally Dakota to English, and then the common English translation. We learned that in seminary. So we indigenize that process to fit our own indigenous way of making sense of what our Dakota people wrote in these letters. Next one. I'm going to go a little faster now here. Keep on going. Keep on going. The Simon Wakandi Ota Ejiape Edewa Akaka. Anuang Mani Chihinku Simon Wakandi Ota Miedo Oa. Next page. Here's another example of Dakota letters heading format. The author is Ruben Tahochpi Wakan, written to Tamakoche. Topic is conditions in concentration camp at Davenport, Iowa. The date was Dakota Wiyawapi Maha Akada Mihima Ed 1864. Translated, many moons scattered geese. Round moon 1864 April. Next one. Here's a letter that I translated. Tamakoche mitakuye hechela eha. Ake Woabi Chichave. And literally, Dakota to English, this country, my relative. Then also, again, letter I make for you. And English everyday translation. My relative, his country, again, I write you this letter. Next one. Dako ka e apiki he chena iotan he on de han kashka uyakubi. Something sacred, they say, the alone most great, therefore in prison we are. They say the Holy Spirit alone is most great, even though we are in prison. Literal translation, I'm frequently thinking God is most great and good, even though we are sitting here in prison. Next. Ipi okini togata manger ni kihan okini ksapik te epcha duka. If they live, perhaps in the future, live, if perhaps wise, well, I think because that's a literal Dakota to English, but the translation, I think perhaps if one lives in the future, he will be wise, because, next, wana otat api, woapi, uspe piki koshka eche api, bitakui Yoma Kishiche do. Literal is now a lot died. Letters they make, the young men always die. This my relative, I am sad. Literal translation is now a lot of young men learn in writing letters have died. This my relatives makes me sad. Next. Hill Wichont inupa he daku makha an techika yechecheshni he techika. Therefore, death second, that is earth upon terrible, like not, that is terrible. Therefore, the literal English is therefore that terror of the second death is nothing comparable upon earth. And because these missionaries, like Stephen Return Rich was missionary, they would try to convert our people, prisoner of war, and they were teaching them about heaven and sin. They said if you do a lot of bad things, they were telling them you're going to hell. But if you do good things, you're going to heaven. So that's the reason why he says that. He said the second death is really something to think about, I guess. This is where I was talking about where 45 young men were killed, executed because they stood up for the women, Dakota women. It says, Obadaki te yedo, dechia, unhipi, hata, wikchemna dopa, sampa, sapta, 45, hena, tapi, kta. I tell, well, it is so here. We live from 10 plus 4, 5, 45, these die will. I will tell, since we have been here, 45 will have died. It's talking about the 45 young men who were executed. Okay, next slide. Hatchet. Wankapi, Dona, Unkayapi. Hechit Wankapi Dona Unkayapi. Like that are lying here, few are getting. Those of us lying here are getting few. Next slide. Sitkana washte de I ka odoma mospe wichaki ka wana maza na chupi maza na chupi kashpa pina ko. Bird good here came and sang, taught them, and now ring time also. In other words, another Dakota came, his name was Goodbird, came here and taught them to sing and gave money for dime rings also. They were probably making rings in prison to the prisoners, and Goodbird bought them. Okay, next slide. Next slide. What is this? Is it one? Oapi wakan yakahe keapi ni unkapi ieche ihakap wanuni yakapi Esh, unkichipi, paper sacred you make, it said alive. We are in time to see you, although we want. They say you are making a sacred book. If we are alive, we wish to see you. I don't know what he was talking about here, but I imagine he was translating this Stephen Rich was translating some of the Bible to these Dakota people, the prison. Okay, next slide. Kahehan ake ampeti wakan eha unkipi kiha weduze woduze echunku bikte. And then again, day holy. At that time we go, if communion we take will, literal translation. And then again, if we go Sunday, we will take Holy Communion. Next translation. Kahe yushnapi kiha hehan pejuit awashte tokia yekta kiye. And this finished, if then medicine man, where will, he said the sacred after. And when this is finished, the medicine man say he will go after Sunday. Sometimes we don't know if, when they say medicine man, whether they're talking about Piwi Chashla or missionary. We don't know because they didn't distinguish between a medicine man and a missionary. On next slide. Takwashte nachopi jashni wadake weinochja Oshikapi ka nihichiapi. Something good here can, I think women are pitiful and they are scared. I think we hear bad news that women are pitiful and scared. Talking to women that were abused. Okay, next slide. Ota taku yuta pishni. Naji chapi ka eched kun taku wakan kiksuya pishni A lot, something eat not, they flee. And several, something scared, remember not. A lot of the women have not eaten, they flee, and several don't remember the Holy Spirit. It's a mixture of Christianity. They were teaching, and also the women were learning because of the severity of what they experienced. A lot of them left. They don't remember what they were taught about the Holy Spirit. Next. We try it be na ke obdecha happy tehia wada unshikapi epche. Oh, these are getting towards scattered is terrible. I consider they are pitiful. They are becoming to be scattered, and I think this is terrible. They are pitiful. I don't know if he's still talking about the women or who he's talking about here. Okay, next. He wataku washte ki he washte taku shiche wakaki shie chasampa. Therefore, something good. That is good, and something bad, suffering. Therefore, something good is good, and further, something bad causes suffering. Next. I have to look at my time. I'm on there. It's almost 25 after 10. Washtedakaya eche. We taught Hawachi, Daku washte eche. Ikta oasi inaji unkash washte. Like habitual ways, they're thinking something good at all stand, if only good. If only they would always think about doing good, all standing will do good things. Next. I'll keep on going. I'm gonna stop translating, and I'm gonna go on to the other things that are on this tape. Okay, go ahead. Keep on going. Just the end of the letter that Reuben Taohpe Wakan, Reuben, his nest, sacred, holy, wrote. Okay, next slide. Is that in? Habitakie Eochistiana, Taku Ota. We translated 150 letters that were written in this Davenport, Iowa. Eche wo we want to do happy eche if you have any questions, I'll try to answer whatever questions you have. Don't all ask questions at the same time. Any questions?
How big were the boxes that were in the museum?
I can't hear you.
How big were the boxes in the museum?
How big were the what?
Boxes.
Huh?
Talking.
Oh, boxes. Oh, I would say, what country? Maybe I think it's this table, about this. It would be good if you could go, go check them out yourself to see what you think. Madaki ki taku moiwa redu heki ishtawa madaki. You'll see them yourself with your own eyes. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Well, because they're not, we charge that back report here, copy, they're not a check.
Yeah, the missionaries, Washichu missionaries, had Iba, Dago, Oapi, Hanako, Christianity, was spiritual copy.
So we in Wakanza, fortunately, they play a copy.
Yeah, Hechi Isha, Oapi, Kakapi, and churches, don't know your mission.
None of the Kulu copy.
We don't know that. We haven't researched. That's a good question, because those of you that are dealing with Dakota language, you need to research these museums. If they say, if they know you're Dakota and they don't want to open these documents to you, get a washichu to that's we coach to Washu maybe she could open the door for you. So you have to do crafty things among the washichu in order to get a hold of a lot of these documents. We learned that because me and Reverend Mike Simon, Dakota, we're almost full blood. Like myself, I'm 7'8". So a lot of times when I go to a museum, they take one look at me or Reverend Mike Simon and they make judgments. They think we don't know anything, or we're not worthy of looking at these documents. They have not judgments like that. Sometimes I'll say, one day I tell the museum, I got a PhD. You have? And then they start asking me, where did I get my PhD? Where did I go to seminary? And they go on the computer to check it out, see if I'm telling the truth. You know what I mean? They don't trust us. They think we're telling a lie if we say we have a PhD.
No, we charge like, we need to shagloka hit a copy, every report itself.
Give it have a chocolate copy, yeah, the that report.
No, we in the Wakanza can use too.
And it's only a copy. We they still stayed with their husbands or brothers or whoever was incarcerated there. So, what we want to say was there, my uncle, Dwayne, Piwata. You should ask a lot of questions while you're here, because I'm 83 years old. Pretty soon, I'm going to take a journey to the spirit world. I have 1 foot in Ujimaka, I have 1 foot in heaven. So you need to learn from us, ask a lot of questions. Wo ota, unkupo, duka, unipik de wana ehake ekta na ujipi. We're at the end of our lives, so those of us that are born in our generation, you need to take a tape or ask a lot of questions. You're going to lose the knowledge that we have. The reason why I say that is because these young men that are sitting here from Sistine, every week they come and take recording of me. Taku ota wolumache imauha. Taku iota yomakipi here maska ogema kopi. Nina yopia taneha wate kana ko avate chuluya pina nina wata. So there's a give and take in terms of if you could record somebody, it would be good to pay them something good so they could go eat, try it, and try it. How?
You're talking about these letters here, and it makes me wonder, when the Lakota were captured at Blue Water, and they were taken to Fort Laramie, and marched to Fort Pierre on foot, with that stockade. They were held there for over 2 years until the chiefs went to Leavenworth prison before they got released. I was just wondering if there were letters that might have existed from there. I've never heard any. I've heard about some people trying to pursue some reimbursement for 900 and something horses that the soldiers killed.
Yeah.
I never heard any letters or anything, but they were held there at Fort Pierre. That's how Fort Pierre got that military prisoner of war camp. The agencies were there.
You said that are there other prisoner of war letters in various museums? Yes, there are. There are a lot of records in these museums. You, the new generation, you need to go do research. And when you do research, do also word study. So you could be able to translate what these Dakota writers, what they mean in the Dakota, So the purpose of me and Reverend Mike Simon we wrote this book is because of you, the new generation. We not only want you to teach Dakota, we want you to do research. Museums Nakota, Daku, Hanaka Biki Hana, Oyade Bikta, Chip. So you got a lot of work in front of you. Go to these museums and ask for what they have that are Dakota, Lakota, Nakota. What documents they have. There's still a lot of things they have in these museums. They hide them from us. So, like I said, send a washichu to open the door so that they could say, what Dakota record do you have in the museum? They trust the Washijus, whereas they don't trust us Dakotas. We're still living in that age where Konki Papi, they're still scared of us for some reason. I don't know why. If we have a whole bunch of Washiju sitting here, the first question I know they'll ask is, these prisoners of war, what kind of retaliation are they thinking about? They'll ask that question. Do you think that we still want to kill Washiju people? They still think we have revenge in our minds. So, teach them that we don't have revenge in our minds. My answer is that we want to survive. We don't have revenge. We just want to survive as a people. That's the only thinking that we have. And I don't know if they believe it or not. Doktora watching for you just to watch the Unkoki Papi. They're still scared of us for some reason. How? Our time is going to be up here 5 minutes. Any questions? Tako mashimako piwakipi. Now beki la scapa bo. Give me a handshake. That handshake you give me is going to go a long ways today for me. Nina pidama pi namaha pi kung chandema hospital. Pete was to hapo. Pidama.